Imagine walking down a really busy city street right now.
Okay.
You pass by these massive skyscrapers, luxury cars, people in tailored suits rushing to these super important meetings.
Right, the standard modern hustle.
Exactly. They're all projecting this aura of complete control and success. But then you see someone sitting on a piece of cardboard near a subway grate.
Yeah.
Their clothes are torn, their hair is matted, they have zero social capital, right? No networking prospects.
Completely invisible to the power structures of the city.
Totally invisible.
Yeah.
Now imagine a worldview that looks at that exact scene and declares without a single hint of irony that the person on the cardboard might actually be the central pillar holding the entire universe together.
Wow.
Right. While the people in the suits are essentially just building sandcastles on a sinking ship.
That is a wild image to start with.
It is, and that is the exact premise of the ancient source material we are cracking open today. You are joining us for a deep dive into an incredibly curated, highly specific collection of 40 prophetic traditions.
Yeah, historical accounts and sayings.
Exactly, and they are fiercely focused on a single, thoroughly countercultural concept. And that is the path of spiritual poverty.
It's a profound inversion of literally everything we are conditioned to believe about human flourishing.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, if you look at the cultural water we swim in today, the primary directive is accumulation.
Right.
We are instructed from a very young age to build our portfolios, to expand our networks.
Secure the bag.
Exactly. Secure our physical comfort, establish a bulletproof personal brand. The driving anxiety of modern life is basically the fear of not having enough.
Yeah, that constant low-level panic.
Right. But what this compilation of ancient traditions does is take that exact definition of security and just, well, dismantle it piece by piece.
Which is fascinating.
It really is.
Yeah.
However, it's vital to establish right up front what this material is actually trying to communicate.
Right.
Because it is not, and I want to be clear here, it is not romanticizing circumstantial destitution.
Okay, so it's not saying everyone should just try to go bankrupt.
No, not at all. It doesn't argue that starving against your will is inherently magical or something. Rather, it makes this really sharp distinction between accidental poverty and deliberate intentional detachment.
Got it.
We are looking at an exploration of an inner architecture. The core argument threaded through these 40 traditions is that an intentional emptiness of worldly desire creates, well, the only possible space for ultimate fulfillment.
Like clearing out a crowded room.
Yes, the logic is essentially volumetric. If your internal cup is already filled to the brim with anxieties about your status, your wealth, your image...
There's no room for anything else.
Exactly. There is quite literally no room left for anything transcendent.
And to really grasp how radical this volumetric shift is, we can't just talk about it in, abstract philosophical terms.
Right. We need the human element.
We do. We have to look at the flesh and blood historical figures who are placed right at the beginning of these sources. The compilation introduces us to a very specific, really fascinating group of people who embodied this concept to the absolute extreme.
Yes, the al-Sufa.
Right. Translated as the people of the bench.
The people of the bench represent this fascinating sociological and spiritual phenomenon in early Islamic history.
Let's set the scene for that.
So we are talking about 7th century Arabia, specifically the city of Medina.
Okay.
And the bench refers to a literal, raised, shaded platform attached to the Prophet's mosque. And the people who lived on this bench were companions of the Prophet who existed in a state of extreme, unmitigated material deprivation.
And the physical descriptions provided in the source material are incredibly stark. I mean, they aren't described as these serene monks glowing with enlightenment.
Not at all.
The traditions literally refer to them as the vagabonds of the immigrants. It specifically notes their outward state. They wore rough, dirty clothing. Their hair was constantly disheveled from sleeping in the dust.
Because they didn't have homes.
Right. And they were, for all practical purposes, completely rejected by the higher echelons of society. The texts point out that doors of influential people were not open for them.
Yeah, they were locked out.
Completely. And in a society where tribal affiliation and wealth dictated your entire worth, they were entirely locked out of the social mobility game. They weren't even permitted to marry affluent women because they possessed zero financial standing.
And no influential lineage either.
Yep.
You really have to understand the brutal reality of the tribal social capital of that era to appreciate what it meant to be one of the people of the bench.
It wasn't like today where you could just go get a job.
Exactly. In 7th century Arabia, your tribe was your life insurance.
Wow.
It was your social security, your legal protection, all rolled into one. To be an immigrant in Medina without a wealthy clan backing you, without property and without outward presentability, meant you were profoundly vulnerable.
You're essentially a nobody.
You were an eyesore to the emerging elite. Yet the texts pivot sharply on a crucial detail here.
Which is?
It notes that despite this profound lack of resources, despite being physically hungry and socially invisible, these individuals meticulously fulfilled their moral and communal obligations.
Wait, really? Even while starving?
Yes. If they owed something, whether it was a physical effort, a prayer, basic human decency, they gave it freely. Even when they received absolutely nothing in return from the society that largely shunned them.
Man, that is intense. And this is where the narrative dynamic of the source material completely shifts, I think. Because, according to the traditions, the prophet didn't view them as a burden.
No, not at all.
He didn't view them as a charity case to be pitied or a social problem to be solved. He actually had this staggering, almost incomprehensible reverence for them.
He really did.
The text describes a specific moment where the prophet stood over them, observing their extreme physical poverty, the immense daily effort it took just to survive. But crucially, he was observing what the text calls their pure hearts.
That's the key phrase.
Right. And then he makes this monumental declaration. He says anyone from his community who remains on their specific path, who is satisfied with that state of detachment, will be his direct companion on Judgment Day.
It's a complete elevation of the lowest class to the highest possible cosmic status.
It's flipping the pyramid upside down.
Exactly. And the cosmology presented in these texts takes it even further. The traditions describe an afterlife featuring this massive heavenly basin.
Right, I remember reading that.
Yeah, a reservoir whose water is said to be whiter than milk and sweeter than honey. According to the text, when humanity is gathered, the very first people permitted to arrive and drink from this basin will not be the wealthy philanthropists.
Not the guys who built the hospitals?
Nope. Not the powerful generals, not the kings. The VIPs who drink first are explicitly identified as these disheveled, rejected vagabonds of the bench.
There's one detail in the sources that really hammers home how high of a priority these individuals were, and it involves the prophet's own daughter, Fatima.
This is such a powerful story.
It really is. Now, if we think about basic parental instinct, let alone nepotism, you would expect a leader to ensure his own child is comfortable before anyone else.
Of course. That's just human nature.
But the text recounts an incident where Fatima approached her father asking for basic domestic assistance or financial aid because she was physically exhausted from grinding grain.
Her hands were blistered.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the prophet explicitly refused her request. He told his own beloved daughter that he could not possibly give her aid while the people of the bench had stomachs that were literally folding in on themselves from hunger.
That prioritization is meant to shock the reader.
It shocked me.
He is actively placing the welfare of the most marginalized, unproductive members of society above the comfort of his own immediate family. It establishes a completely new social order.
Based entirely on spiritual merit rather than bloodline.
Right. Merit, not utility or economic output.
Okay, I have to stop here and push back a little on the underlying logic of this, because if you are listening to this right now in the modern world, this probably sounds deeply counterintuitive, maybe even a little backwards.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, we operate on the fundamental belief that you should, dress for the job you want. You have to network, you have to project competence and status to be taken seriously and to do good in the world.
Right, the whole personal branding thing.
Exactly. These individuals on the bench had dirty clothes, messy hair, and couldn't even get a meeting with anyone important. Why is this specific text positioning them as the absolute spiritual VIPs? What is the actual mechanism that makes their squalor so spiritually elevated?
That is exactly the friction these texts intend to create. To understand the mechanism, we have to look at what social capital actually costs the human psyche.
Okay. Cost in what way?
Well, think about how much of your daily cognitive load is spent on maintaining your image.
Too much, honestly.
Right. We worry constantly about how our peers perceive us, whether we are wearing the right labels, if our online profile looks impressive enough, if our car signals the correct tax bracket.
It's exhausting.
It is. That maintenance of ego requires massive amounts of internal energy. What the text is arguing is that the absolute lack of social capital for the people of the bench was actually their greatest superpower.
Wait, their lack of capital was a superpower?
Yes, Because no doors of worldly power were open to them, they were entirely exempt from playing that exhausting game.
So because the world had already rejected them, they were liberated from the world's expectations.
Precisely. The pure hearts that the prophet observed weren't magical. They were the logical result of not having an audience to perform for.
Oh, wow.
Think about it. When you have absolutely nothing to lose and no image left to protect, your intentions undergo a radical purification.
That makes a lot of sense.
If you do a good deed when you are wealthy and respected, there's always a lingering question, right? Did I do this for praise? Did I do this to maintain my status as a good person?
You can never be 100% sure of your own motives.
Exactly. But if you are a vagabond on a dirt bench and you do a good deed, you know for a fact you aren't doing it for applause, because society has already decided you are worthless.
You are doing it purely for the divine.
Right. The mechanism of their elevation is the total absence of hypocrisy.
That makes so much sense when you break it down as a psychological state. The people of the bench lived this way mostly out of circumstantial necessity, right? They were immigrants who left everything behind.
Initially, yes.
But as we move deeper into the compiled traditions, it becomes clear that this state of detachment was not just meant to be a coping mechanism for refugees.
No, it shifts into a universal prescription.
Right. The texts present this as a deliberate daily choice that everyone should aspire to, even those who had the capacity to acquire vast wealth. And this leads us to one of the most vivid metaphors in the entire collection.
The rider under the tree.
Yes,
Yeah.
the concept of the rider under the tree.
The transition from circumstantial poverty to chosen detachment is critical here. The traditions highlight this through the personal choices of the prophet himself.
Okay, let's look at those choices.
The compilation claims that he was presented with an unimaginable opportunity. The Creator offered to turn the entire valley of Mecca into solid gold for him.
Just a literal valley of gold. That's the ultimate blank check.
The ultimate concentration of wealth.
Okay.
And the text notes that he explicitly rejected it.
Rejected a valley of gold.
Completely. Instead of limitless security, he chose a rhythm of alternating scarcity and sufficiency. He stated that he preferred to be hungry one day and full the next.
Why would someone choose to be hungry?
Well, the rationale provided reveals the core philosophy of the text. He reasoned that when he was hungry, he would supplicate, plead, and remember his vulnerability, thus maintaining a tether of dependence.
Okay.
And when he was full, he would praise and express gratitude, maintaining a tether of appreciation. The underlying argument here is that continuous, uninterrupted wealth creates an illusion of self-sufficiency.
It severs the tether.
Exactly. When you never have to worry about your next meal, you subconsciously begin to believe you are your own provider.
And his actual daily living conditions reflected this deliberate rejection of comfort. There's a scene described in the sources that feels almost uncomfortably intimate.
The story with Umar.
Yeah, the Umar story. A close companion named Umar enters the prophet's private room and finds him sleeping on a mat made of harsh, woven palm leaves.
Very abrasive material.
Extremely. And when the prophet sits up, Umar sees the physical grid-like marks of the rough mat imprinted deep into the skin of his side.
Yeah.
Umar starts weeping. He is looking at the leader of a growing empire, a man who could command immense resources, sleeping on something that physically hurts him. Umar asks why he doesn't just acquire a softer bed, just a basic mattress.
A very logical question.
Super logical.
Yeah.
And the prophet's response is the thesis statement for this entire way of life.
It is a masterclass in spatial and temporal perspective. He asks Umar, what do I have to do with the world? And then he delivers this striking analogy.
The writer.
He says, my example, and the world's example, is just like a rider who traveled on a hot summer day, stopped to rest in the shade of a tree for an hour, and then moved on and left it.
I find that analogy so incredibly clarifying.
It really paints a picture.
If we translate that to a modern setting, it's like treating your entire earthly existence as a layover in an airport terminal.
I love that comparison.
Think about it. If you walk into gate B12 at an airport and you know your connecting flight leaves in exactly 1 hour, you would never start measuring the terminal windows for expensive custom silk drapes.
You look insane.
Right. You wouldn't hire a contractor to rip out the carpet and install hardwood floors, and you certainly wouldn't buy a luxury leather sofa to replace those awful plastic waiting chairs.
No, because you're leaving.
Exactly. It would be an absurd waste of energy. You just sit in the uncomfortable plastic chair, you drink your overpriced water, and you wait for your boarding zone to be called.
That is the exact psychological framing the text is aiming for. The tradition argues that every single human being is just a rider resting under a tree.
Wow.
The tragedy of the human condition, according to this worldview, is that we forget we are traveling. We start building permanent mansions under a temporary tree.
We start buying the silk drapes for the airport terminal.
Exactly. We get so fiercely attached to the shade, to the aesthetics of the layover, that the inevitable moment we have to leave becomes a source of immense trauma. Deliberate detachment isn't about hating the tree or hating the shade.
Okay, so it's not self-loathing.
Not at all. It's about accurately identifying your relationship to it. It is fundamentally temporary.
And the people around him internalize this airport terminal mindset to a degree that is genuinely hard to comprehend today.
Oh, they took it to the limit.
They really did. The compilation recounts a famous historical incident involving two of his closest companions, Abu Bakr and Umar. And they are engaging in what is essentially a charity competition.
Yes, the expedition funding.
Right. The community was facing a crisis and needed funds. Umar thinks to himself, today is the day I am finally going to outdo Abu Bakr. So, Umar goes home, takes his considerable wealth, audits everything he owns, splits it exactly down the middle, and brings half of his entire net worth to give away.
Which is astronomical.
By any historical or modern standard, a staggering act of philanthropy.
Parting with 50% of your accumulated wealth voluntarily is almost unheard of. It shows a massive degree of detachment.
Right. But then Abu Bakr arrives, and he doesn't bring half. He brings everything. Every single coin, every single asset.
Complete liquidation.
Exactly. The prophet looks at this total liquidation and asks him, what have you left for your family? And Abu Bakr replies that he has left them God and his messenger. He literally bankrupted his own household for the cause.
And the text notes that Umar immediately recognizes he can never compete with someone whose internal tether to the world has been completely severed.
Wait, I have to jump in here.
Go for it.
Because if I am listening to this right now, a massive red flag is going up. I understand the poetry of the gesture, but from a practical, modern standpoint, isn't Abu Bakr being incredibly irresponsible?
It definitely looks that way to us.
Right. If a friend of mine came to me today and said, hey, I just felt so spiritually detached that I gave away 100% of my family's savings, my kids' college fund, and the deed to our house to charity, we have $0 left, I wouldn't call him a spiritual master.
What would you call him?
I would call social services. I would stage an intervention. How does this text reconcile this extreme, almost reckless spiritual detachment with the basic biological necessity of feeding your children? Does the text advocate mass homelessness?
That is a brilliant pushback. And it's exactly the cognitive dissonance the text is designed to provoke.
Okay, so it wants us to be a little disturbed by this.
Yes. It forces a collision between material causality and divine causality. To understand Abu Bakr's action, we have to look at how the text redefines the very concept of security. Well, to the modern rational mind, security is highly quantifiable. It's money in a diversified index fund, it's a paid-off mortgage, it's a comprehensive health insurance policy. We view those material things as the barrier between us and ruin.
Because tangibly they are. If the bank account is empty, the kids don't eat.
In a strictly material framework, yes, you are absolutely right. But in the framework presented by these traditions, ultimate trust in divine provision is the only true security.
The only one.
The only one. The text views physical wealth as inherently fragile. Markets crash, currencies devalue, property burns down. Material wealth is an illusion of control.
Okay, I see where this is going.
So from Abu Bakr's internal perspective, he wasn't leaving his family destitute. He was actively transferring their reliance from a fragile, temporary, worldly asset to an infinite, indestructible divine asset.
He believed he was securing their future with an entirely different currency.
Far more reliable currency in his eyes.
So it's not that he didn't care about his family's security. It's that his definition of what constituted a safe investment was fundamentally radically different from ours.
Precisely. It requires a level of absolute certainty that borders on the incomprehensible for most people. But it is a recurring theme. The compilation includes another fascinating biographical snippet about a man named Musa bin Umair.
Ah, yes, the ancient influencer.
That's a great way to put it. The text describes his origins as the ultimate privileged youth of Mecca. He had access to the absolute finest food and drink. He wore a custom-made suit worth 200 dirhams.
Which in that economy was an astronomical headline-grabbing sum of money.
Oh, absolutely. He was known for his luxury. Yet he encountered this philosophy and voluntarily gave up all of that wealth and elite status. The text describes him at the end of his short life wearing nothing but a humble, rough sheepskin tied together with thorns.
Going from a 200 dirham custom suit to tying a sheepskin together with thorns is a terrifying descent in social class.
But the text notes that the prophet pointed to Musa specifically as an example of a heart that God had actively illuminated. He descended to the bottom of the material ladder entirely by choice.
Driven by an overwhelming love for the divine.
Exactly. And this ties directly into how the source material explicitly defines the threshold of having enough.
Yes, the minimalism advocated here is extreme. The text draws a very stark line for what constitutes a complete and successful life. It states, if you are healthy in your body, safe in your surroundings, and have your food for the day, it is as if you have the whole world.
It's a profound statement.
I want to repeat that because it's so contrary to our culture. Health, basic safety, and exactly one day's worth of food. If you possess those three things, the text argues you are essentially a king possessing the entire globe.
What the text is trying to do here is completely short-circuit the anxiety of accumulation. It's telling the reader that the pursuit of luxury is not just a waste of time, it is an active spiritual hazard.
It's dangerous.
Yes. There is a specific tradition recounted where the prophet dispatches a companion named Muad to Yemen to serve as a leader. His parting advice to Muad is a strict, explicit warning. He says, beware of luxury, for the true servants of God are not luxurious.
And there's also that warning against real estate, basically.
Right. The compilation includes a severe warning against aggressively acquiring estates, farms, and property. It explicitly states that acquiring such assets causes one to desire the world and become permanently tethered to it. You end up serving the property rather than the property serving you.
Okay, so we have these incredibly dramatic outward actions. We have people giving away their entire net worth, sleeping on mats that scar their skin, trading designer clothes for sheepskin, and viewing a single day's meal as infinite wealth.
A lot of physical austerity.
But if we read closely, the sources are very careful to clarify a potential misunderstanding here. They point out that this outward austerity, the visible poverty, isn't actually the goal in and of itself.
That's a crucial distinction.
You could sleep on a dirt floor and wear a sheepskin and still be a deeply arrogant, terrible person.
Oh, definitely.
All of these physical manifestations are merely symptoms. They're supposed to be the external evidence of a massive internal rewiring. Which brings us to what I think is the real crux of this entire philosophy.
The architecture of the heart.
Exactly. The architecture of the heart versus the profound danger of the outer shell.
That distinction is the beating heart of these 40 traditions. The text is unambiguous. Faith and spiritual detachment are not about wearing the correct outward costume of a pious, minimalist person.
It's not cosplay.
Right, it's not cosplay. Real faith is defined by what settles deep in the heart, and crucially, it must be proved by how you interacted with reality. To illustrate this, the sources introduce a vital philosophical distinction between two types of knowledge.
Right, the text differentiates between the knowledge of the tongue and the knowledge of the heart.
Exactly. The text states that knowledge of the tongue is merely a proof against a person.
Meaning what, exactly?
It means you can be highly educated, you can articulate all the correct theological philosophies, you can quote scripture flawlessly, and you can sound incredibly enlightened on a deep dive discussion like this one.
Uh-oh, calling us out.
Exactly. But if that knowledge hasn't penetrated your inner being and altered your baseline desires, it's completely useless. In fact, it's worse than useless. It's just evidence that you knew the truth, but actively failed to embody it.
That is sobering.
On the other hand, knowledge of the heart is what the text calls actually beneficial. It is knowledge that fundamentally transforms your internal architecture.
There is a really compelling story in the traditions that perfectly illustrates this demand for internal rather than external proof.
The Haritha story.
Yes, a man named Haritha happens to cross paths with the prophet one morning. The prophet casually asks him how he is doing, and Haritha makes this incredibly bold claim. He says, "I have awoken as a true believer."
A huge claim to make to a prophet.
Right. And the prophet basically stops him and says, "Hold on, watch what you are saying. Every truth has a proof. What is the proof of your faith?"
And it's fascinating to look at what Haritha doesn't say in response.
Yeah. He doesn't pull out a metaphorical spreadsheet of his religious habits. He doesn't say, "Oh, my proof is that I prayed 100 times last night," or "I fasted for a month," or "I donated half my income."
Right. His proof has nothing to do with outward actions.
Haritha says that his proof is that his soul has become completely detached from the world, to the point where his literal perception of reality has shifted.
The unseen becomes seen.
Exactly. He tells the prophet that he can vividly envision the people of heaven visiting each other, and he can practically hear the people of hell crying out. The unseen spiritual world has become more tangible and real to him than the physical dirt he is standing on.
And the prophet's response isn't to call him crazy.
He validates him. He says, "You have known, so adhere to it." The prophet confirms that this profound internal perceptual shift is the only true proof of faith.
If we unpack the psychology of the Haritha story, it reveals how this spiritual system operates. Haritha achieved this state because the overwhelming noise of worldly ambition was finally silenced within him.
The static was gone.
Think about how much mental bandwidth is consumed by our attachments. When you aren't constantly plotting your next career move, or refreshing your stock portfolio, or obsessing over what people think of your outfit, a tremendous amount of internal processing power is suddenly freed up.
So for Haritha, that reclaimed bandwidth allowed spiritual realities to come into sharp focus.
Yes. The text argues that the unseen world is always there. We are just too distracted by the shiny objects of the physical world to perceive it.
But the text also provides a terrifying counterexample to Haritha. It delivers a very severe warning about the inverse of this state.
The warning about the hypocrite.
Yeah. It claims that the most severely punished person on Judgment Day is the individual who appears perfectly good, pious, and detached to other people, but who has absolutely no good inside their heart.
The ultimate fake.
Their outer shell is perfectly manicured for public consumption, but their inner architecture is rotting.
It is a devastating indictment of performative spirituality, which feels, honestly, incredibly relevant in an era where we can curate our moral and spiritual personas online.
Oh, 100%. We curate everything.
The text emphasizes that the divine gaze bypasses the outward performance entirely and is fixed exclusively on the state of the heart. To help the reader cultivate that inner wealth, the sources outline what they call the four treasures.
Okay, let's lay those out, because they are essentially the four pillars of this internal architecture.
They are.
The four treasures are a thankful heart, a remembering tongue, meaning a tongue that is constantly occupied with remembering the divine rather than idle chatter.
I mean, gossip.
A patient soul during trials, and complete trust in God's provision.
If you possess those four elements, the text argues you are wealthier than any billionaire on earth, regardless of your material circumstances, because your internal state is entirely insulated from external shocks.
But the compilation adds one more profoundly countercultural concept to this inner architecture. And from a psychological standpoint, it might be the most fascinating insight in the entire collection.
Hiding misfortunes.
Yes, the concept of hiding misfortunes, this part really caught me off guard.
It's very anti-modern.
It is. The traditions literally state that concealing your afflictions, keeping your sickness quiet, and hiding your misfortunes is a treasure of righteousness. Now, let's look at this through a modern lens, because the contrast is jarring.
It's night and day.
In our current era, the immediate, almost involuntary reflex to any misfortune, any bad day, any health scare, or any trauma is to post about it online. We broadcast our struggles to solicit sympathy, to get validation in the comments, or just to feel seen by our community.
It's the default response.
But this ancient text is prescribing the exact opposite. No, keep it hidden. Swallowing your pain in silence is a spiritual treasure. Why? What is the psychological benefit of suffering in secret?
It comes back to the core theme of reliance. When you experience a trial and immediately broadcast your misfortune to other people, what are you doing psychologically?
You're venting.
You are seeking a human remedy. You want someone to comfort you, to validate your pain, or to offer a solution. You are outsourcing your reliance to the creation. You are asking the world to soothe you.
Wow. Okay.
But by actively choosing not to seek human sympathy, by enduring the trial in silence, and taking your complaint exclusively to the divine say, the individual forces themselves to build an entirely self-contained, unshakable reliance.
That is wild.
It purifies the relationship between the person and the creator. It becomes an intimate secret shared only between the two.
So by refusing to let people pity you, you systematically cut off your dependence on human validation, which forces you to draw strength entirely from the unseen.
Exactly. It requires an iron will.
It really does.
Yeah.
But it sets up the next major theme of the text perfectly. Because if I am listening to this right now, I'm thinking, okay, I was on board with The minimalism, the mindfulness, the deep psychological resilience. It sounds like a rigorous but logical life hack.
Sure.
But the text doesn't stop at psychological resilience. It indicates that once a person builds this specific inner architecture, once they achieve this extreme level of internal clarity and silent reliance, the literal boundaries of ordinary reality begin to bend for them.
Yes, the text suddenly pivots into the supernatural.
The narrative shifts from internal discipline into what the traditions describe as extraordinary events,
Right.
known in the historical literature as karamat, or the miracles of the saints.
And it is crucial to understand how the text frames these events. They are not presented as magic tricks or sorcery.
Right?
They are presented as the logical, inevitable byproduct of a completely purified human consciousness interacting with the fabric of reality.
And some of these accounts read straight out of a fantasy epic. We have to discuss the story of Umar and Sariya because it is one of the most famous incidents recorded in these sources.
It's mind-blowing.
Umar, who we mentioned earlier, is now the leader of the entire community. He is standing on a pulpit giving a standard Friday sermon to the congregation in the city of Medina. Meanwhile, there is a Muslim army commanded by a man named Sariya fighting a desperate battle in Iraq.
Which is geographically hundreds and hundreds of miles away.
Literally a month's journey by camel. Suddenly, in the middle of his normal sermon in Medina, Umar interrupts his own sentence, stares off, and shouts at the top of his lungs, "Oh, Sariya, the mountain, the mountain."
You can just imagine the scene in the mosque.
They must have thought he was crazy.
The congregation in Medina is completely baffled. They are looking at their leader shouting tactical military commands to a wall.
Right. People are whispering, wondering if Umar has lost his mind. But then, weeks later, a physical messenger arrives in Medina from that exact army in Iraq.
And the messenger gives a report of the battle.
He explains that they were in the middle of a brutal engagement, completely surrounded, and on the verge of being annihilated by the enemy forces. But suddenly, out of nowhere, the entire army mysteriously heard a booming voice that sounded exactly like Umar, shouting at them to take the mountain.
And they followed it.
They followed the auditory command, retreated to the high ground, and that tactical shift saved the entire army.
It is an extraordinary narrative that shatters our understanding of physical limitations.
Right. Umar shouting from a wooden pulpit in Medina and physically vibrating the eardrums of soldiers on a battlefield in Iraq. That is ancient telepathy.
Pretty much.
How does a rational mind process this? How does the text itself explain this happening without just saying it's magic?
The text justifies this phenomenon through a specific conceptual framework called farasa, which translates roughly to spiritual intuition or profound insight. There is a specific warning embedded in the traditions. It says, "Beware the intuition of the believer, for he sees with the light of God." The philosophical mechanism here is tied directly to what we discussed about Haritha.
The bandwidth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Human consciousness is normally clouded by the static of worldly desires. Greed, anxiety, ego, physical hunger, lust. Our perception is limited by our biological hardware. But when you systematically remove that static through rigorous detachment, your consciousness tunes into a higher frequency of existence.
So Umar wasn't casting a spell. His mind was just so radically free of worldly clutter that the limitations of space and time temporarily dissolved.
Precisely. The text suggests that when the heart is pure enough, it becomes a mirror that reflects divine light, illuminating realities that are geographically or temporally distant.
It is the ultimate state of flow.
Elevated to a cosmic metaphysical level. And this unseen perk isn't just about bending space. It's also about a hidden spiritual elite that exists completely under the radar of normal human society.
Which brings us to the secret worshippers.
This is a beautiful image.
The sources paint a vivid picture of Judgment Day. The vast majority of humanity is standing around in terror, waiting for this prolonged, agonizing reckoning of every deed they ever committed. But then, a specific group of people suddenly materializes.
The ones with the green wings?
Yes. The text says they possess green wings, and they literally fly directly over the massive walls into paradise, completely bypassing the accounting process. The angelic guards at the gates are stunned.
I mean, they bypass security.
They stop them and say, "Wait, who are you? Did you not go through the reckoning? Did you not stand for judgment?"
And their answer reveals the ultimate value of the hidden misfortune concept we discussed earlier.
Yes. They tell the angels, "We worshipped God in secret, so he loved to admit us to paradise in secret."
It's the ultimate VIP entrance, but it was earned through total earthly anonymity.
Because they didn't want the world to know about their devotion, their ultimate reward is equally hidden and remarkably swift, which leads directly into what might be the most fascinating cosmological concept in the entire document.
The hierarchy of the Abdal.
Or the substitutes.
This is where the text makes a staggering claim about the unseen architecture of the world itself. It asserts that there are constantly 40 hidden men, the Abdal, who are literally keeping the physical and spiritual world intact.
Holding it all together.
Yes. The tradition specifies their geographic distribution. 22 of them reside in the Levant, the region of Syria and Palestine, and 18 are in Iraq. They are the invisible spiritual pillars holding up the universe.
And the key detail is their title, right? Substitutes.
Right. The tradition states that whenever one of these 40 individuals dies, God immediately replaces him with another to maintain the cosmic balance.
So the text is claiming there is this covert, rotating team of 40 spiritual masters who are entirely responsible for the world not collapsing into chaos.
Essentially, yeah.
And presumably, based on everything we've read, these aren't the kings, the emperors, or the wealthy merchants. These are the people with the dirty clothes and pure hearts we talked about at the very beginning, the vagabonds on the bench.
They are the ones with the capacity for it.
But what is the actual mechanism here? How do 40 poor men in the desert hold the world together? Does the text explain how they exert this spiritual gravity?
It does, and the mechanism is explained in what is arguably the most profound tradition included in the sources. It's often referred to as the Hadith of voluntary deeds.
Let's hear it.
It outlines the ultimate progression of the human-divine relationship.
Yeah.
The text states that as a servant continuously draws near to God through extra voluntary acts of devotion and detachment, a profound metaphysical transformation occurs.
Okay.
God declares, I become the hearing with which he hears, the sight with which he sees, the hand with which he strikes, and the foot with which he walks.
I become the hearing with which he hears. That is a breathtaking concept.
It is the theological underpinning for all the miracles and the cosmic balance we just discussed. When a person empties themselves entirely of their own ego, their own desires, and their own will, they become a pure, unobstructed vessel.
Their actions are no longer driven by limited human agency.
Exactly. Their faculties are completely aligned with and animated by the divine will. They stabilize the cosmic order simply through their pure, egoless presence.
So that is why Umar could see a battlefield hundreds of miles away.
He wasn't seeing with Umar's biological eyes. He was seeing the sight that the divine provided through him. The substitutes hold the world together because they are the conduits through which divine mercy flows into the physical realm.
Okay, I want to pause here, take a breath, and look at the whole picture.
Sure.
Because it is very easy to listen to all of this, the severe detachment, sleeping on harsh mats, giving away all your money, hiding your pain in absolute silence, wandering around in dirty clothes, dissolving your ego until you are just a vessel.
It sounds intense.
And conclude that this path sounds incredibly bleak. It sounds austere, puritanical, and frankly, miserable. It sounds like you have to become a joyless ascetic staring at a cave wall to achieve any of this.
It can definitely come across that way.
But the text actually pivots in the final sections and reveals something entirely different. It demonstrates that true spiritual poverty is actually deeply, vibrantly joyful.
That pivot is vital for understanding the holistic nature of this tradition. The compilation is very careful to demonstrate that true spiritual poverty does not equate to puritanical misery, misanthropy, or antisocial behavior.
Right.
In fact, it manifests in the most beautiful, warm, and generous social character imaginable. The sources illustrate this by quoting a revelation given to the ancient prophet Abraham.
Yes, the text states that God revealed to Abraham that having good character guarantees entry into the divine presence, even if that good character is practiced with disbelievers.
It's a universal currency.
Your kindness, your warmth, and your generosity are a universal currency, regardless of the theological alignment of the person you're interacting with.
It completely rejects the trope of the isolated, grumpy monk who hates everyone because they aren't spiritual enough. Instead, the text vehemently attacks miserliness and hoarding.
There's a funny story about that, actually.
Yes. There is a wonderful, almost comedic physical interaction described in the sources, where the prophet wanted to emphasize a point to a companion named Imran. To make sure Imran was paying full attention, the prophet physically grabbed the tail of Imran's turban from behind and gave it a sharp pull.
I can just picture that, a sharp physical tug to say, hey, listen to me, this is important. And what did he tell them?
He told them that God loves spending and actively hates stinginess. He said God loves generosity. even if it's just with dates, meaning even the smallest, cheapest, most common item.
Right.
And he loved courage, even if it's just killing a snake.
Mm.
The core lesson is about the internal disposition. A detached heart is naturally effortlessly generous because it doesn't fear running out of provisions.
It doesn't hoard because it doesn't view the material world as its source of security.
Exactly.
And this generosity is deeply tied to the concept of community. The text places a massive emphasis on the simple act of eating together. There is a story of a man who complains to the prophet that he eats his meals but never feels physically full.
And the diagnosis is immediate.
The prophet asks, "Perhaps you eat alone." He tells the man to gather with others, eat from a shared plate, pronounce God's name over the food, and blessings will physically descend on the meal.
The communal aspect of life is elevated to an act of supreme worship. The traditions state that as long as a person's food table remains set and open for others to eat from, the angels are actively praying for that host.
Hospitality becomes a direct mechanism for divine grace.
It really does.
And I think this is one of the most practical takeaways in the entire deep dive. It is hospitality without the crushing performance anxiety that usually accompanies it.
Oh, that's such a relief.
Let's look at the story of Salman al-Farisi. He has guests come to his home, and instead of throwing a massive, expensive banquet to impress them, he serves them incredibly simple, rustic food, just basic bread and fish.
No frills.
But it's what he says to his guests that is so profound. He explicitly tells them, "The prophet forbade us from going to excessive lengths. Otherwise, I would have burdened myself for you."
It is a brilliant social boundary. If we connect this to modern life, think about how many times we panic clean our entire house, buy expensive groceries we can't really afford, and stress ourselves out completely just because people are coming over for dinner.
Oh, all the time. The performance of hosting destroys the actual joy of connecting.
Exactly. We are so worried about being judged on our outer shell, on our interior decorating, on our culinary skills. Salman is saying, I'm not going to put on a fake, stressful performance for you. I'm going to offer you exactly what I have, which is this simple fish and bread, and we are going to enjoy each other's company without the exhausting burden of pretense.
This text is telling us, just offer the bread and be fully present with your guests.
And that ability to be fully present allows for the embrace of harmless joy and the arts, which the text explicitly sanctions. Because these individuals are so detached from worldly outcomes and social climbing, they're actually the most capable of enjoying the simple pleasures of life.
They aren't calculating their next move.
Exactly, so they can be entirely in the moment.
The sources give two fantastic, vivid examples of this joy. The first takes place right inside the prophet's own house during the festival of Eid. There are two young girls playing tambourines and singing festive songs.
Just celebrating.
Abu Bakr walks in, sees this, and gets furious. He calls the music the devil's instruments being played in the house of the prophet. He assumes that to be holy, one must be somber and austere at all times.
But the prophet corrects him immediately.
Yeah.
The text notes that the prophet uncovered his head, essentially relaxing his formal posture, and told Abu Bakr, leave them, for every people has a festival, and this is ours.
He actively defends their right to celebrate and experience joy through music.
He protects their joy from puritanical strictness.
And the second example features a highly revered early scholar named Sa'id bin al-Musayyib. He is walking through the streets of Mecca, and he hears someone passionately singing poetry about a woman named Zainab.
Secular love poetry.
Right. Now, a strict, joyless interpretation of religion might assume he should cover his ears or scold the singer for singing secular love poetry in a holy city. But what does he actually do?
The text describes him stopping in the street, listening, and tapping his foot on the ground to the rhythm of the song for a long time.
I love that.
And he openly declares to those around him, this is what is pleasant to hear.
I just love that image. This revered ascetic scholar just vibing to a good song in the streets of Mecca, tapping his foot. It perfectly encapsulates the paradox of this entire philosophy.
It is a paradox, but when you view it through the lens of the inner architecture we've discussed, it is perfectly logical.
How so?
If you are deeply attached to the world, every joy you experience is inherently tinged with anxiety because you are terrified of losing it. If you buy a fancy car, you are immediately stressed about it getting scratched.
You can't even enjoy it fully.
Exactly. But if you have achieved the spiritual poverty the text describes, if you have realized that you are just a rider resting under a tree, and your heart is anchored only to the eternal sun, then you are finally, truly, free.
Free to just exist.
You can enjoy a simple piece of bread, a shared meal, or a beautiful song sung in the street with absolute unadulterated presence. You own the moment because the moment doesn't own you.
What a profound journey this text has taken us on. Let's quickly retrace the map we just traversed. We started by looking at the pioneers of this path, the physically disheveled but incredibly pure-hearted people of the bench, whose complete lack of social status was their greatest superpower.
The ones the world ignored.
Right. We explored the radical, deliberate choice of the writer under the tree, choosing to view the world as a temporary resting stop rather than a permanent home.
And redefining security from a fragile bank account to indestructible divine reliance.
We discussed the necessity of building an inner architecture, cultivating a thankful heart, and discovering the profound psychological strength found in hiding our pain in silence.
Not outsourcing our reliance.
We analyzed how this deep internal detachment leads to intuition that can literally bend reality and tune into a cosmic flow state. And we culminated in a vision of life that isn't bleak, but is characterized by generous, joyful, unburdened community and tapping your foot to a good poem.
It is a comprehensive, meticulously designed blueprint for fundamentally rewiring how human beings interact with reality.
And so what does this all mean for you listening right now? Look, chances are you are not going to throw away your mattress tonight to sleep on a harsh woven mat.
Probably not.
You probably aren't going to liquidate 100% of your bank account tomorrow morning like Abu Bakr. And that is perfectly fine. The core takeaway from these 40 ancient traditions isn't about perfectly replicating the physical aesthetics of 7th century Arabia.
No, it's about the internal state.
It is about auditing what truly owns your heart. It's asking yourself a series of uncomfortable questions. Am I building a permanent mansion under a tree I inevitably have to leave? Am I constantly outsourcing my reliance to the creation to validate my struggles? Or am I building a silent, unshakable trust in the divine?
And as you reflect on how you evaluate the world around you, I'm going to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We live in a society that idolizes billionaires, tech influencers, and powerful politicians.
We put them on magazine covers.
We do. We hang on their every word. And we genuinely believe that they are the architects of our reality, the ones holding society together. But based on the cosmological hierarchy we explored today, the concept of the 40 hidden substitutes consider this alternative.
What if we're wrong?
What if the people actually keeping the world spinning right now are the most invisible among us? What if the true pillars of the earth are the poorest, the ones with the dirty clothes, the matted hair, and the pure hearts, whom we walk past on the street every single day without a second glance?
A diagnostic landscape that is entirely murky, where the X-ray of worldly success shows nothing of value, but the hidden heart holds the entire universe together. Keep questioning the things you were told to value, keep exploring the hidden depths of what it means to be truly secure, and keep striving for that beautiful, unburdened presence.